Welcome to another episode of Same Page. We are your hosts, Sarah Simagist, and
I'm Lenard and Sarah.
today we're going to talk about a topic that I think a lot of couples maybe talk about, but definitely argue about. I'm not sure if, they openly discuss it, but I definitely think it is something to discuss because it's so present in our daily lives. And that topic is having friends of opposite sex. And yeah, so where do we want to start off with this conversation? It's such a loaded conversation.
Such a lot of conversations, but at the same time, I know for me it's pretty simple. Like I guess it boils down to whether or not this friend, this friendship that I had with this person of the opposite sex occurred before we met or after we met. I think that's a big parameter. If this is someone that that I developed a friendship before we met, and we continued the friendship while we're dating, and then obviously after we got married, then I believe that the partner shouldn't feel threatened or shouldn't feel any type of way, especially if you didn't notice any type of abnormal behavior during during our courtship or during the time that we were dating. But where I find that there's an issue, or an issue can develop, is if you all of a sudden develop a friendship with a person of the opposite sex after you meet, after you start dating your partner, or after you got married, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, who is so and so, and how did you guys all of a sudden get so close, or or develop this friendship? So that's where, for me, I guess those caution signs come up, and then you tend to kind of like take a step back, and you may want to ask a couple questions to your partner at that point.
Okay. So does it make a difference if that person is in a relationship?
Well, that's another layer.
Yes.
But it should make a difference, absolutely.
So in a difference where you're allowed to be friends with that person, or what's the difference and why?
I know for me, like, if the person is in a relationship, it kind of gives me some comfort that this person wouldn't be necessarily chasing you.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is not always the case.
Not always the case,
right.
but like you don't want to make that assumption, but for the most part, that's people. I guess people tend to think that way.
Well, actually, an example actually comes to mind where I now have, you could say, a male friend that I met after we got married at work, and now it's more just a relationship developed because he went out and he started his own business. I started a business, so we often bounce ideas off each other. The relationship is very business oriented,
Yes.
and but sometimes we go for a coffee and we talk about certain cases and what's going on in our lives and things like that. So it's a little bit more than a business relationship. And it's also a friendship, but I think the way it began, it was more like, hey, you're doing your own thing, I'm doing my own thing. Let's connect and see where that goes. Mind you, that person, they have a family and they're very dedicated to the family. So it's very platonic.
Yeah.
So I guess what you're saying is that, like, if the person is in a relationship or married, it makes it easier to sort of digest.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that if it comes after marriage, then maybe you might be sort of on your guards a little bit more.
Exactly.
But as in my example, that doesn't mean that it's like a no at all. It's very circumstantial. It's very person dependent, and personality dependent. There's a lot of things that factor in that. But for me, I think even a relationship prior to, or a friendship prior to us being married, or dating, I think I still sort of analyze wouldn't say analyze, but you sort of take a look at every friendship differently.
Yeah.
Because there are friendships that you've had prior with a woman of the opposite sex that even when we were dating, I was like, I don't know. Even if it's platonic, that person just didn't rub me the right way. That doesn't mean it was because of your friendship. It could have been just the person themselves,
Yes,
right?
fair
That
enough.
not everybody gets along with everyone, and so that could be. I think that like you really have to take into consideration the whole situation rather than just was it before or after.
Okay.
Yeah, the dating scene. So yeah, that's sort of my parameter. I just go with my gut feeling. And is there certain behaviors that you sort of look for to decide whether it's, platonic, or if you're comfortable with that friendship versus if you're not comfortable with that friendship?
You may have to clarify that, like,
Yeah, like with your interaction. So for example, let's say I had a male friend that I met. He was my friend prior to us
yeah.
dating. Is there certain things that you're more likely to look at? Are you looking at her body language more, or what is said, to sort of determine if you're comfortable with that friendship? It could be like talking on the phone a lot, or at the time of the day that you talk on the phone. Are you guys talking on the phone like at midnight, or is it just like, hey, it's noon, a quick phone call sort of thing? So are there certain red flags that would make you less likely to be okay with a relationship?
I guess it would come down to those non-verbal cues. Like if you all of a sudden like light up
Right.
whenever you talk about that person, or are about to talk to the person or see the person, that would definitely have me like some cause for concern there. And then if you'd laugh at basically all of his jokes,
Okay.
that would be a clue for me, where it's like, okay, is he really that funny, or is it you flirting, with this person? So I would try and pick up on those kind of like those non-verbal cues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moral of the story: don't laugh at the opposite sex's jokes. Just, they're not funny.
No.
I see what you mean. Yes, nonverbal cues, and just definitely, if it's on the phone, then it's more like your tone, and if you're giggly and things like that. I think it's a big thing, like what time you guys talk. I don't know, like if it's like after I go to bed and you're on the phone at 11 o'clock, then I'm like, versus during the day. Definitely how long the conversations are could, and how frequent too, if it's like a daily, or more frequently daily, or like multiple times a week, because I feel like I don't even talk to a lot of people on a daily or weekly basis besides my immediate family, so I would be questioning why you're doing that with just a friend, right? Yes. No, that's those are good insights.
And so question for you, so like what kind of parameters should you set if you're gonna entertain having a relationship with the opposite sex?
Before or after dating, or either or?
Either or.
Well, for one, I think your comfort level with me being around that person tells a lot.
Yes.
So if you introduce me to that person, we hang out together with that person, whether they're single or not, I think would make me feel more comfortable. Other parameters would be, I guess, like, I'm not setting a certain number of times you could see that person a month, but let's say I saw that, you were seeing them weekly, for example. To me, that would be cause for a little bit of concern. And it depends why, if it was like something about business or work oriented, then obviously then that relationship is not just friendship, but it's more, business or work oriented. But if it was just for going for dinner or going for lunch or going for coffee that frequently, for me, would raise a red flag.
Yeah.
I just think that if we don't date that often, you shouldn't be dating that
Somebody
person.
else.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know, that frequently. So,
Yeah.
those are a couple of things that come to mind in terms of parameters. We talked about the phone thing, you know,
Yeah.
what time of the day and how frequently. I think a lot of it has to do with the frequency
Mm-hmm.
and your comfort level with me being around that person.
Yeah.
But I do have to say one thing that sometimes, even if you're comfortable with me meeting that person and you think it's very platonic, I may pick up on some cues that you may not.
Mm-hmm.
And pardon me for saying this, but sometimes you're very oblivious to like, you know, other people flirting with you or their behavior towards you. And Lena's like, no, they were super friendly. I'm like, no, they're like stripping you with their eyes.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, she just has, you know, big eyes. I'm like, no, she doesn't.
Yeah.
So I may pick up on these cues, maybe being a little bit more protective.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that even if, you know, you have that comfort level and for you it's purely platonic, the partner might pick up on some things that they might not necessarily feel comfortable with, and it might be just like, oh, you know, do you want a glass of water? Like you could have asked without touching, sort of thing. Yeah. So I think every situation is very different, and as I think as soon as there's a certain as soon as you're no longer comfortable with a certain situation, I think you need to address it like right away. And even if it's something small, before it becomes something big, because sometimes you forget what are those things that made you uncomfortable, right? So you may say like, oh, you know what, a touch to the chest, it's not a big deal. Or, you know, a touch on the leg, not a big deal. And then that just progresses and progresses and progresses. And then when your partner is like, well, give me one example. And then you just forget all these, you know, subtle cues. So I do think it's very important right at the beginning. If you see something fishy, then you just speak to your partner about it. Not attack them, but just say, have you noticed that this person does X, Y, Z, right? Yeah. So it's like a conversation right from the beginning, so they know how you feel.
Yeah, I think you bring up the whole comfort part is like speaks volume, at least to me. It resonates with me for the simple fact that if you feel any type of way, bring this person around your partner, and all of a sudden there's like an awkwardness or a discomfort, then usually that's a sign where it's like, as much as you want to pretend that this is platonic, but there may be some more feelings involved, whether it's from your side or from their side. So I think that's a good like litmus test where it's like, how do we interact, either if the person's single, like the three of us, or if the person's part of another couple, the four of us, whether we're in a double date or whatnot. If you see the dynamic is kind of like making you uncomfortable, then I think that's a sign of like, you know, maybe you should take a couple steps back and reevaluate this friendship.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we said what we had to say about dating, not dating, but
definitely not dating.
Just having friends of the opposite sex. I think you can, in a marriage, in a relationship, I think it's quite possible. Leonard does have a lot of female friends, but I feel quite comfortable with most of them, if not all of them, because if not, they just wouldn't be friends anymore.
Exactly, and these were all friends prior to us meeting.
Yes, exactly. And I think just the dynamics makes it okay that he continues to be friends with them, and he can, you know, see them and you know, hang out sometimes without me being there, and I'm comfortable with that, because sometimes I just want to be home.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, you do you. And not that we're close, but we're close enough that I trust your friendship. All right, well, let us know if you guys have friends of the opposite sex. Is this a conversation? Is it something that's just taboo and not talked about in your relationship and in your marriage? And how do you guys feel about having friends of the opposite sex in your relationship?
So please like and subscribe. Until next time.
Don't forget to live your truth.